Hey there, and welcome to Nauctis on YouTube. In 2001, New Zealand announced its decision to scrap all of its combat aircraft, which at the time consisted of A-4 Skyhawk fighter jets. Why did New Zealand make that decision? What were the impacts on their military strength? But first, let's take a look at New Zealand's military defense capabilities. New Zealand is a small island nation in the South Pacific with a population of approximately 5 million people. Although known for its scenic beauty, cultural diversity, and peaceful society, New Zealand also maintains a professional and capable military force to protect its national interests and contribute to global security. According to Global Firepower, New Zealand is ranked 103rd out of 145 countries in 2023, reflecting its relatively modest defense budget, size, and equipment. New Zealand's defense force comprises 3 branches: the New Zealand Army, the Royal New Zealand Navy, and the Royal New Zealand Air Force. Together, they have approximately 14,000 active personnel and 2,000 reservists. The Army has about 4,500 soldiers and operates a range of light armored vehicles, artillery systems, and helicopters. The Navy has about 2,300 sailors and operates 2 frigates, 4 offshore patrol vessels, 2 coastal patrol craft, and a multi-role vessel. The Air Force has about 2,500 airmen and operates 6 P-3K Orion maritime patrol aircraft, 5 C-130 Hercules transport aircraft, 8 NH-90 helicopters, and 4 A-109 helicopters. New Zealand's defense policy is based on 3 principles: national security, international obligations, and national interests. Its national security involves protecting its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and citizens from external threats. Its international obligations involve fulfilling its commitments to its allies and partners, especially Australia and the United States. Its national interests involve advancing its economic prosperity, regional stability, and global peace. New Zealand is a signatory of the ANZUS Treaty, a defense pact between New Zealand, Australia, and the United States, dating from 1951. However, after the 1986 anti-nuclear legislation that prohibited access of nuclear-powered or armed vessels to ports, the United States withdrew its obligations to New Zealand under ANZUS. Since then, ANZUS exercises have been bilateral between Australia and the United States. Despite this setback, New Zealand maintains close defense ties with both countries through other arrangements such as the Five Eyes intelligence sharing network. Why has New Zealand scrapped all its combat aircraft? The decision was primarily motivated by the country's changing defense needs and priorities, as well as the high cost of maintaining and upgrading an aging fleet of aircraft. New Zealand's defense forces had traditionally focused on providing support for its allies, rather than engaging in offensive military operations. The country's leaders determined that its military resources would be better utilized in areas such as peacekeeping, disaster relief, and maritime patrol, rather than in maintaining a combat air force. Additionally, the cost of upgrading the aging fleet of A-4 Skyhawks was deemed prohibitively expensive. The New Zealand government estimated that upgrading and maintaining the aircraft would cost approximately NZD 1.2 billion over a 10-year period, which was deemed unsustainable given the country's limited defense budget. In place of its combat aircraft, New Zealand has since invested in other defense capabilities, such as upgrading its maritime patrol aircraft, investing in new cybersecurity technologies, and increasing its focus on intelligence gathering and analysis. New Zealand defense budget. New Zealand's military spending is about 3% of its yearly budget and about 1% of its GDP, which is much lower than the United States military spending of 4% of its GDP. However, this percentage can vary depending on equipment purchases, ranging between 1.2% and 2%. Supporters of higher military budgets often argue that military spending should be linked to GDP. Comparing military spending to GDP shows how much of a burden such spending puts on the economy. Large budget increases for military departments cannot be expected for some time to come, so there is a need to find ways to maintain, improve, and support core roles and capabilities without significant cost increases. The NZDF has already begun its Defense Transformation Program, DTP, which focuses on improving efficiency in logistics and human resources. The New Zealand Army is deployed far more often than the Air Force. The A-4 Skyhawks had not been deployed in action, even to support ANZC forces in Vietnam. With their very short range relative to the area they might have to defend, the aircraft became unsuitable for their primary purpose of close air support due to their low linger time and limited capability to carry weapons. While they were great Navy aircraft in 1950 when they were designed, they were no longer effective in 2000. They definitely were not A-10 Warthogs. New Zealand is now facing similar issues with its more crucial maritime surveillance wing, which currently consists of 6 P-3 Orions that are 50 to 60 years old, and its equally vital transport wing, which has 6 C-130H aircraft that are 50 years old. These are now being replaced, which will take the defense budget to over 2% of the GDP in the next 5 years. Australia faces similar challenges, and after scrapping the F-111 Aardvark, they are now using older models of the F-18 until their order for the F-35 is filled. Like Canada, choosing a single-engined aircraft, F-Series rather than A-Series, with severely limited range over vast areas is an interesting choice. New Zealand is a unique country, and its amazing geographic isolation helps keep threats at bay. Their primary defense concerns are focused on protecting their exclusive economic zone waters from illegal fishing activities, and fighter planes are not effective in dealing with this. Politically, New Zealand has always played a role in promoting rules-based behavior in the international arena. These policies should trigger a strong response from the United Nations in case of any hostilities towards their territory. Whether this will happen in the current geopolitical climate is another matter. However, the current geopolitical climate suggests that New Zealand can no longer rely on its traditional allies. Instead, these allies are pressuring them to buy increasingly expensive military equipment, which is fiscally out of reach for a small nation like New Zealand. The country could make much better use of that money by investing in social and environmental programs, which would benefit the entire world. The bottom line is that against a well-organized large invasion force, New Zealand will always be vulnerable. Its huge shoreline is simply not defensible with its small fiscal and population base. However, no large nation-state has anything to gain from invading it. Buying New Zealand's milk powder, timber, wine, and seafood on the open market is much cheaper than mounting an invasion. Furthermore, taking ownership of land is already possible by bidding in online real estate auctions. There's no need for boots on the ground. As a result, New Zealand does not face any credible military threats and only needs to defend itself against economic pressure from the armaments industry to purchase their expensive products. These products are likely to be ineffective in a modern war anyway, given the next generation of weaponry being developed by China, Russia, and the United States. The military tends to plan for a war like the last one they fought, unable to accept that technological changes render most of their weaponry and strategies obsolete. Therefore, refusing to engage in these war games and focusing resources on realistic goals like fisheries patrols, search and rescue, and disaster relief is a responsible and mature step for a small nation like New Zealand. All they need is a coast guard and a small territorial force capable of participating in peacekeeping missions abroad, as well as disaster relief efforts at home and in neighboring island states. Costa Rica is a great example of a small nation that has made a wise decision to abolish their army in 1948. Despite upheavals in neighboring countries, Costa Rica has remained a stable democracy for decades. New Zealand could follow in their footsteps and prioritize sustainable development and peaceful cooperation rather than investing in outdated military strategies and equipment. That's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of our new content. See you next time.